Hey everyone, in this video we're going to cover some Microsoft Excel functions. Now, functions actually work very similar in Excel as they did in Python or in MATLAB. There's a function name and then an open parentheses, and then the function takes inputs separated by commas, and then we close the parentheses, and then the function returns outputs. Now I've loaded this data set that I have. This is of cell phone data from a certain company. And the columns don't really need to make too much sense to you, but to just know that some of our data are integers, and some of them are text, and some of them are floats, right? And some of them are empty. And so I'm just going to show you a few functions in Excel, and I encourage you to look up more functions. The more functions you can learn, the better. And the odds are, if you're trying to do something logical in your data set, in your spreadsheet, the odds are good that there's a function that can help you do whatever it is that you're trying to do. Okay, the first, maybe the most important function that I want to cover here is if. There's an if function. And just to demonstrate this, I am going to look at column K here, uplink modulation type. And what I'm going to do is look at those data. You'll see the QPSK, quadrature phase shift keying, and then there's a 16-bit QAM, and there is also 64-bit QAM, and then there are empty cells here. What I'm going to do is make a new column L that will be 1 if the entry in column K is quadrature phase shift keying, QPSK, 0 else. All right, let's see if we can do that. So I'm going to start here because I'm not going to give this a column header, or maybe I will. Maybe just I'll call it if example. Okay, and so now here's where the data really starts. And I'm going to say equals, because this is a formula, if, open parentheses, right? And then some documentation comes up. It wants a logical test, then comma, value if true, comma, value if false. All right, well, my logical test is going to be, is this cell in K2 equal to, how about QPSK? Oops. So in quotes there, I'm going to say QPSK, right? So again, that's the first input argument. That's the logical test. Is K2 equal to QPSK? And that's a string, so I'm putting QPSK in quotes. Then comma. Now, what do I want to have happen if that's true? I want this cell to be a 1 if it's true, and comma, what do I want if it's false? I'm going to put a 0 there if it's false and hit enter. All right, now, this entry, K2, is QPSK, so now in L, I've got a 1 there. Very good. And now here's the magic of Excel. If I click this thing, this plus sign, and I drag, right? You'll see now it fills in as ones and zeros. Because I use a relative reference, right, without the dollar sign, now as I go down the rows, you'll see in the formula bar that K2 changes to K3, to K4, K5. So it's doing what I was hoping it would do. It's looking at the column next to it and determining if it's QPSK or not. And if it is, it's filling in column L with a 1 or 0. And you can see like the blank space gave me a 0, 16-bit QAM gave me a 0, and so on. So it works as I would hope. So that's awesome. All right, so I'm just going to clear that. Okay, that was my if example. Now I'm going to do another example using the COUNTIF function. Maybe I want to count how many QPSKs there are in my data set. What I can do is just say equals count if open parentheses. Now you'll see it wants a range. I'm going to give it the entire column K. So I'm just going to click on K. Then comma, it wants the criteria. And I'm going to say, in quotes again, is it QPSK? So it's not a condition, it's just criteria. Is it QPSK? Count if. and I'll hit enter there, and it returns. Now this is not over the entire amount of rows, but this just returns 3,939. It counted every single instance in our data set to find out if it's QPSK or not, and if it was, it counted it 3,939. So that's a quick way of determining how many times this thing comes up. 3,939 times in our data set. All right, I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to show you another function called concatenate. In this example, I'm going to take the record index and I'm going to concatenate it with the file number. Maybe I want the record index dash the file number. And so over here in column L, I'll say cat example. Okay, and then when the data starts, I'm going to say equals, because this is a function, concatenate. Okay, the case doesn't matter, capital or lowercase, and then open parentheses. Now it wants text 1. I'm going to click on A2, a relative reference, and then comma, it wants text 2. Then I'm going to choose to put a dash. So I'll put the dash in quotes because a dash is a string. Then comma, it wants text 3, and I'm going to say B2, and I'm going to use a relative reference there. And then I could continue on like text 4 and text 5, but I'm just going to close the parentheses and hit enter. And so you'll see here what it has done. It has taken the text in A2, then, and it was smart. It knew that this was a number, but it converted it to text, so that's cool. So it took 333, then dash, because that was the second input argument I gave it. Then it took the text, or really the number, and converted it to text in B2, and it concatenated those three things because those were the three input arguments. That's really nice, right? And if you look at my function, you'll notice, again, I've used relative references, A2 and B2. I haven't used the dollar signs. And so now if I click this button here and drag, right, and you'll notice that it updates the function for me as I go across the rows, A4 and B4, A5, B5, A6, B6, and so on. So now I have the record index dash the file number. That's really, really useful there. All right, but I'm going to delete that, and we're going to move on to the left-right function. Now let's look at column K, uplink modulation type, and I've got quadrature phase shift keying, so that's a type of phase shift keying. And you'll notice I have 16-bit QAM, I've got 64-bit QAM. All right, those last three characters are important. This is a type of phase shift keying, Q phase shift keying, or this is a type of QAM, 16-bit QAM, or this is a type of QAM down here, 64-bit QAM. So what I'm going to do is ask Excel to just extract the three characters on the right of this thing. In other words, get the PSK, get the QAM, QAM, all right? And so when I'm going to do that, how I'm going to do that is first give this a header, maybe call this write example, all right? And then I'm going to say equals, because this is a function, and I'm going to say write, open parentheses. Now you'll see the documentation. It wants text, so I'm going to give it a relative reference, K2, the column to the left of this cell, comma. Then it wants the number of characters, and I'm going to tell it, hey, I want the characters to the right, I want 3 characters there, and close my parentheses, hit enter, and you see it returns PSK. Now because this is a relative reference, K2, I didn't use any dollar signs. When I drag down, okay, it's going to update that reference for me across the rows, K2, K3, K4, K5, and each time it's looking at the cell to the left of it, which is what I wanted it to do. So you'll see for the 16-bit QAM here, it took out QAM. That's good. You'll see how it handles the empty cell. It just returns empty. PSK, QAM, even down here for the 64-bit QAM, it just took out QAM. Nice. And in this case, I used the right function. There is a left function in case I wanted to extract, the characters to the left of my text. All right, but I'm going to clear this, and I think that's the last of the functions that I wanted to cover in this video. Thank you very much.